Action!
There was just as much action behind the scenes as on screen, with camera people running around and intense visual effects being produced live. The glass stones ending definitely caught us off guard, but the process to capture the way it surprised Gion, Se-byuk, and Sang-woo was an extensive one. Filming, the actors only had a small amount of glass explode near them. The slow motion feeling really comes through in how the actors perform. After capturing shots of the trio, each got to do their close-up work with singles as well. It may be a short moment, but plenty of hours were put into capturing every nuance and angle. When time came for the big visual of the glass stepping stones we see exploding, the team didn't resort to CGI for the shards of glass, except for the ones that appeared to harm the players and fly towards the camera. They actually went ahead and created the whole sequence in studio. These practical effects look unreal on the set. It's no surprise it translates to such a powerful and stunning visual in the episode.
Hello players, let me welcome you all to the 5th game.
The cast of Squid Game dove right in when playing glass stepping stones and definitely didn't have it easy since for many, it was actually terrifying to film. While CGI came into play in terms of establishing the setting and just how high in the air the players were, much of the carnival-like set was fully built. Even the glass. Fortunately, no one actually went through shattering glass, instead landing on a board supported by crew to allow the actor to fall safely. In the show, the set that Red Light Green Light takes place on already seems awfully crowded with the nearly 500 players, but on the set, there were even more folks, making it a pretty chaotic yet well-organized space. We would have thought CGI was used to add the bodies of those who lost during the game, especially the piles of people at the doors, but the actors all actually stayed wherever they were when they lost the game, which couldn't have been very comfortable. When it came to filming close-ups, multiple cameras were used to capture the performances, and the filming crew was often running along with the players. The added detail of using a red marker to signal when a person took a shot is evident of just how thorough and meticulous the team was. No one could get away with cheating during the game either. If one person moved out of time, "We're looking at you, Sang-woo," then everyone had to start over.
Today's game is Tug of War.
The performers did not have it easy playing the often physically demanding games when filming the series, since they really were going through the struggle depicted on screen. The sweat, effort, and even chained handcuffs securing them to the rope were real. There definitely couldn't be much movement between takes since everyone was literally tied up together. With a scene like this, there isn't really any other way to do it than at 100%.
Move up or you die!
Maybe one of the most terrifying, gasp-worthy moments in the show is seeing Gion hanging between safety and the end of the game for his whole team. The tension is real, even though the platform they were on was just 1.5 meters off the ground. While swinging on a rope is usually pretty fun, this collective rope swing down tells a very different story and shows just how far the actors and production went to bring the best footage to the screen.
My god, I can't believe how cool that was!
The moment after the most intense tug-of-war we've ever seen is so still, but we can see just how exhausted each and every actor is, having just struggled and fought for their lives, literally. This shot is definitely needed as a moment of pause after the insane game just played, resulting in so many lives lost. This is also a bit of a moment of reckoning. This was hard, but whatever was coming next would only be harder, and they knew it.
You know what? I really thought we were going to die out there.
For the final face-off, the soundstage was a lot emptier with just Gion and Sang-woo competing. But there were many camera people, often filming using handheld video cameras to capture all the frantic action. Not only that, their crew made it rain, making the whole scene just as dramatic as the gruesome fight we see in the final cut. As filming went on, the two actors only got more disheveled, with rain soaking through and blood effects added throughout the battle. In order to get all the footage they needed, the actors had to be on point at every moment.
I won't let you leave here with that money.
The honeycomb scenes looked pretty similar on set as they did in the show. With the exception of the childlike drawn wallpaper, the rest of the set was filled with giant playground equipment and the smell of freshly made dalgona, the Korean honeycomb sweet. Luckily, the actors didn't have to listen to the actual loud noise each time a bullet was fired, as someone on set was in charge of giving a shout to indicate the moment instead, so the performers had a solid, unified cue to react to. Behind the scenes, we get a glimpse of just how hands-on the director was when it came time to shoot. Surprisingly, the cavernous, cool space where we see the confrontation between the police officer and a team member of the Squid Game is real. The opening on the top of the cave and the murky pool made the ideal setting. No doubt the actors felt totally immersed in the story. Shooting these scenes were pretty simple. All they needed were a couple of cameras, the right costumes, and the actors' chilling performances.
Do you want to die?
The glimpses we get of the players' lives before the game offer such a colorful backstory, especially when we see them with their families. Each of these scenes were shot quite intimately and simply, focusing on the narrative and what these relationships meant to the player, which translated to the screen beautifully. It's also one of the only times we get to see a typical everyday aesthetic, making the stark contrast between the real world and the Squid Game world even more apparent.
So which color do you want to play as?
How could we forget the original Squid Game? Filming this scene may have been one of the simplest setups, using an existing playground space. It only adds to the realism of the show and offers a great reminder of where the players started, as innocent children playing games for fun, instead of their lives.
At that moment, I felt as if I owned the entire world.
Hanging out in the dorms between games certainly wasn't any less stressful than the games themselves. The bare-bones set with the cool industrial edge does the trick, and the feeling of the daunting space comes through the screen. What we saw in the show was almost exactly what was happening on set, with all the added cameras and crew people, of course.
We can't fall asleep tonight, okay? Who knows what someone else may try.
Many moments in the Marbles game bring intense connection and emotion. The way they shot these scenes was a pretty stark difference from so many of the large and intense games. The fact that the actors were in a small space together with just a few crew members around really helps the intimacy come through and offers us the chance to get up close and personal with these characters and the short but meaningful relationship they have playing marbles.
We'll go around this whole town and take all the marbles, okay?
One of the reasons the Marbles game is so effective is because of just how well the setting transports us to the alleys of a small village. It makes sense that this is the set the team spent the most time building. Every detail, down to the stunning backdrops, moves us.
The super-powered Umbrella Academy wouldn't be the same without some seriously powerful VFX. The team behind the show put in some incredible work to bring our favorite moments to the screen. Number 1. The epic finale of Season 2 required a lot of impressive VFX work.
You know you're right. Let's change that.
When Handler summons 8,000 agents, they are almost entirely CGI doubles, with only a handful of them being real extras they filmed on set. To make this process even more difficult, it started snowing halfway through their filming of the scene, so some of the extras that they originally had didn't show up again, forcing the VFX team to fix continuity issues via CGI. When the agents charge the house and then subsequently get blasted, those shots are almost completely CGI as well, with the exception of a few small elements and the house itself. It was really complicated.
How are they doing that?
Number 2. Pogo the Chimp looked incredible and was a testament to how talented the team at Weta Digital is. They were tasked with creating this character and didn't shy away from the challenge.
There is a certain challenge in making something subtly believable.
The VFX team knew how important it was to create realistic clothing for Pogo, so they actually developed a new software specifically for making the most realistic clothing possible. When it came time to filming Pogo scenes, they actually used 2 actors for different aspects of the character's performance. Actor Ken Hall was on set in a motion capture suit, interacting with other characters, and providing the body movements for Pogo. Meanwhile, Adam Godley lent his voice to the character.
Does anyone wish to speak?
And did so in a studio where they also captured his facial performance to give Pogo the final touch of real emotion. Number 3. One of the most complex shots the VFX team had to execute was when we see the members of the Umbrella Academy all dancing alone in their rooms. They shot the actors individually on green screen, and then placed them into the scene, which, aside from the actors themselves, was a full CG animation. What's more, it was the first day of shooting for many of the cast members.
I feel like we really had an energy together that worked.
Number 4. When we first meet Luther, we see him casually going about his day on the moon. It's no surprise they didn't actually film on the moon, but it may surprise you that almost everything you see is CGI. Actor Tom Hopper was filmed on a green screen while being suspended with wires to simulate the weightlessness of space. Very few elements were practical, and most of the time the only real aspect is Luther and a part of his spacesuit. Even his helmet was CGI. Number 5. The epic war scene at the beginning of Season 2 was brought to life with a mix of impressive practical set pieces and visually stunning CGI. A lot of the rubble and debris on the ground was real, while the buildings and all the action happening in the sky was CGI. And that tank rolling down the street? That was real. The shell shot out of it was CG animation, as was when Vanya stopped it mid-air. Elliot Page was lifted into the air on wires and shot on a green screen to create the effect of her character stopping the missile. Put it all together and the result is an epic scene.
What the hell was that?
The end of the world, November 25th, 1963.
Number 6. When you have a character that has a humanoid body with a fishbowl head that contains a real live goldfish, you have to get creative in bringing said character to life. When filming, they had an actor wearing the suit and bottom collar piece of the bowl we see in the show, with his head later being replaced with a CGI fishbowl. They did have a fishbowl head on set for reference, but it was only on a stick, and didn't contain any water or fish. Weta Digital, the studio behind the fish effects, bought real goldfish and kept them as pets. Weta Digital did a phenomenal job making it happen.
Surely we can come to some form of agreement that benefits both parties.
Number 7. When we see the Commission's inner workings, we are introduced to an infinite room of workers
be a part of something so grand
that shows the massive scale of the organization. In real life, the room is much less impressive. They shot the scene in a small room with only a few desk workers in front of a green screen. They expanded the size of the room with CGI, and added hundreds of more desk workers to achieve the scale they were going for.
Who was the case manager handling me?
Number 8. When Klaus summons his ghost friends, you can rest easy knowing they're not real ghosts, and are instead the work of CGI artists. In the Season 1 finale and at the beginning of Season 2, Ghost Ben is completely CGI, and when Ben is trying to get out of Klaus, actor Robert Sheehan was acting alongside no one, and had to do his best to pretend to be pushing a ghost back into his body.
We hope you enjoyed that as much as we did.
Number 9. All of the JFK scenes in Season 2 were almost completely CGI. In some of the wide city shots, the buildings, motorcade, and even the people are CGI. When Vanya destroys the FBI building, Elliot Page was on wires on a green screen set, and even then, they were mostly replaced with CGI anyway. And when Klaus tackles the man with the umbrella, the motorcade behind him and all the people in the background are CGI. Why use extras when you have an amazing VFX team? Number 10. Reginald Hargreaves revealing himself as an alien is a shocking twist we didn't see coming. For the reveal, they built a mask that resembled Comfior's face, and had the actor unzip it and peel it off his head. Underneath the mask, on his real head, he wore a motion capture cap. The CGI alien head was added later on to complete the reveal. Number 11. The effects team spent a lot of time developing all the warp and wave effects caused by the powers from the characters. 5 jumping through time, Allison's powers, and Vanya's blast waves all use the same type of viscous effect. VFX supervisor Everett Burrell described the effect as going into and coming out of a bowl of jelly. Because of this, the team appropriately named the effect Jellyvision.
We use my ability to time travel, but this time, I'll take you with me.
Number 12. The scenes with Klaus and his cult involved a mixture of practical and digital effects. The bus scenes were filmed on a big blue screen, with fans used to simulate wind. The city of Varanasi was added using CGI. Number 13. A lot of CGI was used during the White Violin final battle in Season 1. Vanya's transformation into the White Violin was accomplished using bright lights on set, which were enhanced with a CGI glow that was added in later. The theater was at times a real set, and other times they used a CGI version of it, like when the explosion comes through, which was also a CGI simulation. Number 14. The epic shot was created with both practical and digital effects. They filmed it on a giant outdoor set that had a lot of real debris surrounding actor Aidan Gallagher. There was a small green screen behind Gallagher, and the rest of the environment was filled in digitally.
Anyone!
Number 15. The unleashing of Vanya's powers for the first time was a big moment for the character. Elliot Page was filmed alone on a green screen, while the camera rotated around them. The rain and the environment were added digitally. The result was the first display of Vanya's true powers.
Despite trying to avoid it as much as possible, The Witcher is filled with CGI. From entire cities to prosthetics to the magical elements, we'll be taking a look at it all. Check it out.
I believe there are 133 shots in that sequence, and 132 of them involve VFX.
Number 1. You gotta do what you gotta do. This is the moment before we meet our friends, the basilisks, as they appear through a portal. While most of the scene leading up to this shot isn't CGI, it's quite understandable why a green screen may have come in handy.
Trying to be all stoic and serious, and then there's a guy in green spandex.
Number 2. Here come the terrifying lime green lizard heads. You've really gotta be willing to pretend as an actor sometimes, especially in the fantasy genre. You know it's going to look awesome in the end, but honestly, sometimes it's hard to take your job seriously when you're trying to be all stoic and serious, and your acting partner's supposed to be a scary basilisk, but instead is just a bright green head on a stick, operated by a guy in spandex.
I sometimes would giggle.
But with imagination on their side, they manage.
I love the illusion world. I love to visualize everything.
Number 3. If we turned people into trees, we could solve climate change. Think about it. Paul Bullion took on the role of a Leshy in Season 2. The entirety of the Leshy's face is all prosthetics, which is pretty sweet. We can't imagine how long that took to apply every day. All of the vines growing off of his head, though, is where the CGI magic comes in. And who is Geralt attacking? That doesn't look like a Leshy to us. Nope, just a guy flinging around a pool noodle. Okay, it's probably not a pool noodle.
Before we started filming, we had to do quite a bit of training.
Number 4. The grass is always green screened somewhere else. We spotted some green screens in the training scenes too, trying to block out their not-so-perfect location, to replace it with their mountaintop destination later on. Also, is it just us or are the green ropes new? They must be way easier to edit out in post than the black ones. And if you look closely, Freya Allen really isn't dodging a thing.
I love all the stunt stuff, it's so much fun.
Number 5. Beautifying the Beast. You might be surprised to find out that the creation of Nivellen required little CGI. He was dressed in full costume. The only CGI was his face.
You know how like tons of dots and a camera all the time.
But Christopher Hivju absolutely loves that his eyes are his own.
How they made the eyes look like mine is just beautiful work.
So why the CGI and not just prosthetics? Hivju said that a reason is that often beasts don't display complex emotion, but he needed to. Justified, and it looked great. Number 6. 2 halves is more effective than 1. This scene from episode 1 of The Witcher is probably a personal fave. It isn't often an actor does all of his own stunts, and check out how he's only got half a sword. That's how he managed to do some of these cool, more dangerous maneuvers in one shot.
It allows for a lot more moves.
Although, the other actors did find it a bit of a struggle because they needed to match their weapons with the invisible half of the sword perfectly. Number 7. If the sword doesn't work, try hitting him with a shoe. Vladimir Furdik, who played the Night King in Game of Thrones, choreographed the fight between Geralt and the Kikimora. He acted out the scenes he was choreographing by standing 4 people on a table and giving them each a pair of pipes to act as legs. Animating 2 legs is hard enough, let alone 8. They had to watch the footage at a quarter speed to make sure it was moving properly. Julian Perry confessed it was tricky to keep the creature balanced and attacking at the same time. And who could forget all that splashing? That's all CGI too. Number 8. This next one's pretty hot. Magic is definitely one of those elements that is hard to create without special effects. And a lot of CGI tricks went into shooting this scene. The warping skin trick is done using a whole bunch of different mask-like layers in different stages of decay, and just blending them all together. It makes total sense, but how come we never thought of that before? And check out all of the work that goes into making the fireballs. And how about how they're launching people across the room? Why does that look like so much fun? Number 9. The creature that feeds on nightmares. Did the Striga creep you out as much as it did us? While the entire costume was prosthetics, including the dangly umbilical cord, overall the character required a blend of CGI too. They completely redesigned the character out of special effects for some of the more inhuman stunts. We'd say it's impressive, but we know your tricks, CGI designers. You have your character hide in the darkness to make it easier to blend the CGI with the real effects. And the actors were having a blast. They had 3 artists playing the role. Becky Wright played the human form, but they had 2 other performers playing the creature. Number 10. We actually preferred the little guys with their green suits showing. To our surprise, the ghouls were not totally made of CGI. The proof is in the selfies. Wholesome content alert. Aww, how cute are these? Boy, does that suit look uncomfortable though. And eating looks like a major struggle. They were running out of time to craft these scenes, which is why they landed on a halfway point between prosthetics and special effects. Number 11. Literal world building. It's actually amazing the kind of work that goes into creating the buildings for fantasy series. Remember how much time you would spend building your dream house in The Sims, or even a small community? This is like next level Sims right here. Number 12. Ironically, nothing about this nature is real. Layer after layer after layer added on painstakingly to bring this forest to life. Not even Geralt and Roach are real here. Just leads you to wonder, is anything real? Just kidding. And let's talk about Posada. That too was entirely modeled from scratch. VFX supervisor Julian Perry said, almost every minute of this series is a visual treat, which means it required, you guessed it, CGI. As finding that perfect location was a struggle, given they were filming in Budapest in the middle of winter. There's no cutting corners with crafting these CGI bad boys. Now, these guys seem like they're a little lacking in the detail department, but we still like them well enough. What they lack in CGI, they sure do make up in storytelling. Layers. It's all layers. Bone structure, muscle, skin. They definitely weren't skipping steps when they created him, except for maybe the scales. And all these layers remind us of a line from Shrek.
Onions have layers. Ogres have layers.
Well, dragons have layers too, and lots of them. Number 14. We're gonna need some CGI sleeveys to go with these CGI armies. Only about 30 or so people were real out of this entire army. Do you think they craft every tiny person by hand, or do you think they have a copy-paste button? Drawing a picture is hard enough, let alone layer after layer of designing creatures and buildings. We'll stick to pencil crayons and stick figures, thank you very much.
Me and a couple other guys crawling around on the floor, growling at each other. That was weird, I'll never forget that.
Are you curious about how all the effects were done in Wednesday? Well, we've got some secrets to spill about Thing, Nevermore Academy, and all of the featured creatures.
Hello, Thing.
Number 1. Everyone's favorite hand is actually attached to a full-grown man. The extremely discreet and talented Victor Dorobantu wears a full-bodied blue suit to create the effect of the amputated hand. His scenes involved him twisting and contorting into hard-to-reach places, oftentimes crawling on the ground and hiding behind Jenna Ortega. Sometimes he would have the luxury of getting wheeled alongside her on a camera dolly. Check out the way this underwater scene was filmed. Fun fact, Victor Dorobantu and Christopher Hart, the actor who played Thing in the 90s, are both magicians. Apparently, it was very important for the character of Thing to have dexterity, which was one of the main reasons Victor was cast.
Surrender?
Number 2. Remember when she dropped piranhas in the pool? Yeah, they had to do a little bit of special effects on the roof of the school to make it a little less normie. The school is called Polytechnica University of Bucharest, and it was founded in 1818. The swimming pool, though, is filmed at a sports park in a completely different location in Bucharest.
I'm not sure whose twisted idea it was to put hundreds of adolescents in underfunded schools.
Number 3. This would be the monster that Wednesday is desperate to find the identity of. The hide was crafted completely with CGI to achieve that bulging-eyed, razor-sharp tooth and massive hulking monster antagonist created by Tim Burton. He was based on a drawing that Tim Burton designed before shooting even started. He brought a few drawings to the writer's room, and the writers all enthusiastically agreed on the hide drawing. What really went on behind the scenes while shooting was a lot different than what we saw on screen. The hide consisted of a man in a full-bodied black suit with tracking marks all over it, propped up on stilts with crutches attached to his arms to portray the massive size of the monster in real time. Seeing the much less frightening costume that Jenna Ortega really had to react to, we're even more impressed by her performance. Number 4. Obviously, Oliver Watson isn't a real merman, but he's an excellent swimmer. What really went down in this scene was half practical and half special effects. Oliver Watson really did swim underwater, but instead of a full-length mermaid tail, he just had on a regular flipper to assist him in the water. As you can see from that behind-the-scenes clip, he's extremely comfortable in the water and was definitely the right choice to accomplish Bianca in her po-cup scheme. You can even see his mermaid contacts as he does a short video with the cast.
Thing.
Number 5, also known as Cantacuzino Castle. This stunning Romanian castle got a spooky makeover to play the role of Nevermore Academy. The castle is actually pretty inviting when looking at the exteriors and the bright red roof, but the creators of the show thought the roof didn't quite match that kooky Addams Family vibe, so they built on top of it with special effects.
You will love Nevermore. Won't you, Tish?
Of course you will.
Number 6. Remember that time Wednesday was almost ended like 10 minutes after she stepped on campus? Though the scene was definitely a lot safer behind the scenes, it really wasn't all that safe. Jenna Ortega's stunt double, Jenny Ayumi, was really under the gargoyle, and it really did crash down, but with little intermission in between. The gargoyle drops down attached to a wire. The stunt takes place when she is shoved out of the way.
Ooh, that was close.
Number 7. Rowan was definitely binging Stranger Things before this. In the scene where he slams Wednesday up against a tree, he gets help from a few wires behind the scenes. And luckily, Jenna Ortega gets a nice mat to soften the impact. They practiced this stunt with her stunt double beforehand to make sure it was safe enough for her to perform.
I give stunt coordinators such immense anxiety.
Jenna was extremely adamant about doing as many stunts as she could.
I will throw myself on the floor, off a wall.
Number 8. Though you'd think after 2 hits were taken on Wednesday's life, she'd want an hour or 2 of therapy, but clearly she has better things to do. Jenny Ayumi fearlessly hops down from the rooftop and makes sliding down the side of a building on a wire look easier than it possibly ever should. Number 9. No wires, just talent. The intense fencing battle between Wednesday and Bianca was a stellar introduction to their complex friendship.
You must be the self-appointed queen bee. Interesting thing about bees. pull out their stingers and they drop dead.
Okay, the word friendship might be an overstatement, but regardless, we get an incredible stunt sequence out of this classmate conflict.
Your face finally got that splash of color it's so desperately needed.
Number 10. Some of it was at a lake, and some of it wasn't. The Po Cup was filmed across 2 lakes in Romania, but there was also a set built at Buftea Studios. There were even some pretty hilarious mishaps that happened while shooting, causing the entire cast to need a major wardrobe change. This is what could have happened if Thing hadn't saved the day by decking Kent in the face.
I want to welcome you all to the Edgar Allan Poe Cup.
Number 11. We're talking about werewolves, of course. When Enid gets a visit from her parents, she stares in envy at the pack she so desperately wants to be part of. We can't really blame her though. These guys can actually catch frisbees in their mouths. That's pretty impressive. The only thing they really needed assistance with was getting high enough in the air. Nothing a simple trampoline can't fix. Otherwise, a completely practical stunt. Number 12. The quad goes up in flames in the finale. Crackstone wasted no time after being resurrected from the grave.
I will expunge you abominations from this earth!
In the show, the fire starts off from this massive explosion, courtesy of Crackstone's magic, but behind the scenes, it's much calmer. It's clear that the production crew wanted a safe, explosionless set, so CGI definitely came in handy for that. We also get to see Bianca's incredible wire stunt where she stands up to Crackstone. Talk about a character arc. Number 13. Poor Mayor Noble Walker. The mayor ends up getting hit by a car, sending Wednesday's investigation in a whole new direction. In the show, you can't even tell that this was a professionally performed stunt. It looks like he actually gets hit, but if you watch the behind-the-scenes footage close enough, you can fully see the little jump onto the hood of the car, causing for a safe performance. Who did you think it was behind the wheel when you saw the first episode?
Blue Cadillac with no license plates.
Yeah, I know.
Number 14. You'd be surprised how minimal the CGI was to build the town of Jericho. Just little enhancements here and there to breathe more life into the town. It was impressively built from scratch at the famous Buftea Studios, Eastern Europe's largest film studio. It was supposed to look like a typical New England town. You can see they didn't spare any details, really honing on the church steeple as it plays a huge role in the big explosion scene. All of the other stores and shops, the florist shop, cobbler shop, and thrift store, were actually facades based on Charles Adams' original illustrations. Number 15. Don't worry, we're pretty sure they had faces behind the scenes. These faceless characters definitely add a touch of Nevermore spookiness that's so subtle, they're almost easy to miss. The way they achieved this faceless look was by using a planner tracker to track the actors' faces and facial movements. They then used editing software to remove their eyes and mouths, isolating those images and placing them onto the facial data saved for the planner tracker. And what did you think about Wednesday CGI and special effects? It's pretty incredible how many things were completely practical, from the sword fights, the major stunts, the Po Cup, and of course, Thing. What part of the movie magic was your favorite?
You're gonna see sides of her in this series that you've never seen before.
Are you ready to find out everything we know about Wednesday Addams? Like, did you know Tim Burton handpicked the entire cast? Or that Jenna Ortega performed her own stunts and got to work with the OG Wednesday, Christina Ricci?
I know the suspense is killing you.
Number 1. How many times did you see Wednesday blink? There are little Wednesday mannerisms sprinkled throughout Jenna's performance that only super keen eyes would be able to see.
It's funny, I think my posture has improved immensely since working on that job.
Her posture was always perfect, and her arms and hands stay pretty stationary most of the time.
At some point during the first couple weeks of shooting, I did a take where I did not blink at all.
Tim Burton loved that take, so he and Jenna decided that it would be one of Wednesday's weird mannerisms. She didn't even know she was doing it half the time. It just sort of happened every time she would reset for a take.
I would drop all the muscles in my face, and Tim really liked the Kubrick stare where I stared through my eyebrows.
Number 2. Jenna was in a non-stop cycle of work for 8 months straight. We're talking a minimum of 12-hour workdays.
I would wake up around 4:30. I would be picked up around 5:20-ish.
By 6 a.m., she's in wardrobe, by 6:30, she's in hair and makeup, and by 8 a.m., she's on set.
We would do 12-hour days. We would have rolling lunches, so we just eat when we could.
Then in the evening, by around 6 o'clock, she's in stunt rehearsal because on top of all this, she's doing her own stunts and fight sequences. More on this later.
And then I might have a cello lesson, and then I go home. That was my day. That was my life for 8 months in Romania.
Number 3. The shoot days were extra long for a reason. Tim Burton and Jenna Ortega wanted to do as many different takes as possible to really nail down Wednesday's characterization for every single scene. And every single one of these takes were on camera. We're hoping to see an extended edition with all the bloopers. Looking at you, Tim. Number 4. Her hair was one of the most important factors. Everyone knows Wednesday Addams as the girl with the signature long, dark braids. But it was important to Tim Burton to establish some sort of difference between who she was then and who she is now. They did a lot of experimentation with different wigs and clips, but in the end, Jenna Ortega, being as dedicated as she is, offered up something invaluable.
I said, hey, maybe just cut my actual hair.
She was, and they did.
And then he loved it, and that was something that we married and we stuck to.
Number 5. There's major sword fighting and fencing going on in this show. One of the things that makes Jenna Ortega so incredible is the dedication she gives to her work. She spent so many hours training to perfect her fencing and sword fighting skills, so she could perform her own stunts.
There's really important physical aspects like that, like the fencing, that I knew that I wanted to do myself and have ownership of.
Number 6. 20 minutes of winging it. The audition process was over Zoom, as Jenna was in New Zealand filming X. She hadn't slept in 24 hours and described her audition process as being tired enough to wing it. The audition only took 20 minutes. Soon after, she had to pack up and move to Romania for 8 months. When you're approached with a character like this, and a director like this, and a story like this, it's very compelling. You don't know when you're going to get the opportunity to do something like that again. I knew that I just had to take it. Number 7. Every single detail was intentional. When creating Wednesday's look, no detail was too small. The show's creators had a lot to say about her look. Everything about her look was intentional. Wednesday's shoes, for example, are next level. Every teenage girl in the world is going to have serious shoe envy once they see them. When you first see Wednesday, she's in her iconic white-collared black dress outfit. But then as the show goes on, her style evolves. They always wanted her to stand out from the crowd in some way. Number 8. One of the most important factors of the show's look. Romania is not a location that you'll often see in the media, so capturing that grandiose Eastern European vibe was a huge inspiration for both the cast and crew.
I did send a photograph of myself in my office to my agent and said, is this what your office looks like?
Number 9. There are a lot of subtleties to Jenna Ortega's performance.
Wednesday's somebody that I always was compared to my entire life.
Though the showrunners found her to be a perfect fit for the character, she was nervous to portray her because she wanted so badly to do the character justice.
I went to fencing lessons twice a week.
No, good.
I went to cello lessons twice a week.
Everywhere she went, she would walk like Wednesday. She thought people would think she was insane with how much she was putting into nailing down the character.
I wanted her to be specific and certain and assertive.
Number 10. Tim Burton had a very specific vision for Wednesday. According to Jenna, he was one of the most detail-oriented directors she'd ever worked with.
The thing that makes Tim a great visual director is that he has an amazing sense of color and style.
He liked to have a say in how every shot was framed, and even the type of lens used on the camera.
Because he kind of liked when they were wide and a bit disoriented.
He designed and brought to life every single character with sketches.
Goth comes to him very naturally. And Tim designed what the monster looks like in the show.
Number 11. What kind of show would this be without the appearance of the original Wednesday Addams? Christina Ricci joins the cast as Marilyn Thornhill, a teacher at Nevermore Academy.
It is scary, it's a lot of pressure, and you want to do justice to someone like her.
You would think that Jenna and Christina would be having some pretty intense conversations about the character they've both portrayed, right?
The strange thing is we never talked about her being Wednesday once.
There was only one time, on the last day of shooting, that Jenna made a reference to Christina's version of Wednesday. They both had an understanding and an acceptance that their versions were going to be different. Number 12. Did you know Jenna always wanted to star in a silent film?
It is a hard thing to play with an expressionless character.
The origin of most of Wednesday's mannerisms and movements came from the idea of it being shot like a silent film.
I felt like that really encouraged mannerisms or kind of balanced the aspects of surrealism and realism in the film.
Tim Burton really connected with the idea as well, given the fact that the way Jenna conveyed emotion most of the time was silently through her expressions.
Because they can be very theatrical and dramatic and intense, and that is what the Addams family is.
Number 13. Wednesday was originally a Latina character in the Addams Family comics. One of the most important parts of this role for Jenna Ortega was getting to represent Wednesday as a Latina, because it has never been done before.
Anytime that I have an opportunity to represent my community, I want that to be seen.
Another way Tim Burton wanted to make this known was by exemplifying the fact that the Addams Family participates in Dia de los Muertos.
Ours is in the living room. More seating for a year-long Dia de los Muertos.
Number 14. The entire town was built from the ground up. Coupled with the extraordinary setting of Romania, the set of the show is like a character in itself. Gwendolyn Christie talks about her experience at New York Comic Con. What I loved was that we filmed in Romania, so you have landscapes that had not been seen before. It's almost like looking at things with quite a fresh pair of eyes on an epic scale, and much of what you see is real. This team really went all out. They built a town and used locations, and there's an awful lot of authenticity to bring that very specific culture to life. Number 15. Can you imagine getting an email from Tim Burton? Jenna was busy filming the horror movie X, as conversations about Wednesday started to come up at Netflix. Tim Burton was the one who thought about her for the role, as he was a fan of her work, so he sent her an email asking if they could meet.
I kind of felt like I was being pranked or something.
Naturally, everyone fell in love with her performance right away.
Because I'm very dry, and I don't think people can tell when I'm being serious or when I'm being sarcastic.
With Tim Burton behind the show, along with his incredible hand-picked cast and crew, Wednesday is an iconic piece of media in the making.
This is Sandman being made for people who love Sandman by people who love Sandman.
We're getting into all the challenges and behind-the-scenes visions of everything that brought this incredible series to the silver screen.
I'm here at Shepperton Studios, and I'm getting to see what happens when you bring dreams to life.
Number 1. Tom Sturridge, who plays Dream, was basically naked for the entirety of the first episode. The way he was first introduced to his fellow castmates was
naked, climbing into a glass sphere.
And because of the way the sphere was designed, they couldn't open it super easily, so he would be in there by himself for hours at a time. One aspect he loved about that, though, was how that really helped him get into character.
In that silence, you can only ever really believe yourself to be a character.
Number 2. Speaking of getting into character, one thing Tom really struggled with was being introduced as a protagonist who doesn't speak, or even move much for that matter.
It was incredibly important to me to somehow articulate this otherworldliness.
He had a lot to convey with just his body and facial expressions. While using no words, he needed to show the audience that he wasn't human. He was an eternal being who spent his every fiber holding all these universes' dreams together. That's a lot of pressure with no dialogue.
I did work very hard, hopefully, to create an image that would tell an audience that story with no words.
Number 3. The Realm of Lucifer Morningstar. The VFX team spent more time on this episode than any other episode. There are so many incredible practical effects. The gate, for example, is an actual sculpture. At first, they didn't even know if they should show the set on screen. VFX supervisor Ian Markowitz tells Dan of Geek, "Anything that we show of Lucifer's palace is going to be disappointing. No matter what it is, no matter how cool it is, whatever we show is going to be a little underwhelming." But it turned out to be their most rewarding episode. They ended up utilizing real-life images like the Vatican and a specific cathedral in Milan as inspiration. Number 4. So much was actually built practically.
Our art department, our set decorators, our production designers, they are wizards.
It was really important to Neil Gaiman and the rest of the show's creators that whenever they could create or build something, they would do it. There's actually not a ton of CGI in the show compared to what you might think. They even had a real raven on set. It didn't speak, unfortunately, but Tom did get to interact with a real live bird.
Having a raven there was amazing, just something that, like, you're talking it, it's like...
Number 5. Who else is a fan of Despair's Crocs? For starters, Jenna Coleman's character, Joanna, went through almost a dozen different costume iterations before they landed on her iconic trench coat look.
Also, I got really overexcited about having a crucifix in my boot.
For Tom Sturridge's costume design, they also went through a few different looks. At first, he just wanted to be as true to the comic book character as he could get.
And I wanted my hair to be wild, and I wanted my eyes to be as dark as this night.
But obviously, that's not the dream we ended up with.
Neil will agree with me, is I looked ridiculous.
They ended up sticking with Tom's more natural look, as they found that to be a better fit for the screen. Number 6. We've gotta talk about Matthew. Considering they really wanted to take a mostly practical effect with this show, they definitely wanted their CGI to be as top-notch as possible. Ian Markowitz shared his story in creating Matthew with Den of Geek. It is probably the most successful CG feather bird that I've seen, on film or television. And that's saying a lot, because we had a photoreal aspiration for something that was known. The thing was either going to look like a real bird or it wasn't. Matthew not only had to look real, but he had to fly, move, and interact with the rest of the cast. Considering he was once human himself, they had to create facial expressions that resembled natural human emotion. Not a simple task. Number 7. We're all familiar with the famous John Constantine. That's the reason why he's not in the show. Neil thought he'd been represented enough in the media, so he pitched the idea to Alan about turning him into Joanna.
We both thought about Jenna and Jenna's voice, and that went a long way just in terms of my conception of who she was.
They wanted to do a fresh spin on the character, so they took what they loved about John and brought new life into it.
And we just had a lot of fun, I think, on all fronts.
Number 8. There were several Sandman movie and television pitches that didn't work over the years. Neil Gaiman always felt passionate about bringing Sandman to life, but only if it could be done in the right way. He told IGN, "I didn't care about it getting made. I would so much rather that it never got made than a bad version would get made." Even a director he really respects, Eric Kripke, pitched a Sandman series for network TV in 2010. Neil Gaiman had many reservations about that at the time. The damage that you had to do to Sandman to put it on network TV 15 years ago, and in the kind of budgets and the way that you could do it, just meant it wasn't Sandman. Number 9. If you'd read the comics, you'd know how well they pulled this off. When filming the show, they really wanted as many scenes as they could manage to be like you pulled it straight off the page.
What was really thrilling was remembering how accurately some of those frames were replicated.
They always had a copy of the graphic novel right next to the camera.
That was so important to us when we were making it.
Number 10. Ian Markowitz definitely had his hands full here. Something really beautiful, but also incredibly difficult about the show was that every episode is different from the one before it, with Dream being the only thing holding the timeline together. Ian shares his experience working on the show's wide range of sets. It's not a procedural, where we're doing similar things next week. There's always something that's going to be different about the next episode, and Dream may not be on screen for every frame of the show, but he is always going to be at the heart of things. Number 11. Not even his original comics or panels from 1989. We're talking about the scripts he wrote for artists before any of that even got onto the page. When Ian Markowitz was brought on as the VFX supervisor, he found the project to be a bit daunting at first because of how well known the world of Sandman already was. He describes having been given Neil's notes as being gifted gold. He explains, "I thought that starting with Neil's notes was the perfect way for us to think about adapting the show, because sometimes the comic book panel is very comic booky, and it has that wild, quirky, zany quality, which I don't think the show has all of that much." Number 12. Not only did Tom Sturridge go through it with his look, but he also had to mentally prepare to become the eternal being that is Morpheus. Neil gave him some pertinent advice on how Dream carries himself.
He has thought every thought that could ever be thought or could ever be conceived of.
With every line he said, he had to utilize his voice to convey that message to us.
Therefore, when he speaks, it should feel as if it's etched in stone.
Number 13. If anyone can do it, Neil Gaiman can.
Neil Gaiman was the key.
The Sandman comics were first released over 3 decades ago, but the cult following has remained extremely dedicated. It makes sense that a casual dinner conversation between Neil Gaiman, Alan Heinberg, and David Goyer would lead to a Netflix pitch 3 days later.
Honestly, that sort of felt like, okay, well, it feels like it would be a TV first season.
Number 14. They actually had the cast before the writing was even finished. Alan Heinberg was extremely grateful that the Sandman already had such a massive following. They were able to cast for it pretty much immediately. Having the cast at hand was highly preferred, as Alan likes to write with the actor's voice in mind. One of the characters that went through the most transformation on the page was Corinthian.
Neil and I decided, you know what, we're going to embrace everything that Boyd is.
Boyd Holbrook being cast completely changed the way they approached the character.
And there was a version of that with Viv and with everybody in the cast.
Number 15. There has to be at least one. There are so many incredible characters with stories worth following. When talking about the end of Sandman, it makes it much easier for the showrunners to see the end when you have source material you're going off of. But something unknown that excites them are all the potential series they could create from other characters.
There are death miniseries we'd love to explore doing. There are other characters worthy of having their own adventures.
So after going through the practical set designs, comic book replicas, costumes, and Neil Gaiman's vintage Sandman scripts, we're still completely floored by all the incredible talent and dedication it took to bring this series to life.
Stranger Things had trained rats for the show, so why were they fired? In this video, we'll be looking behind the scenes at all the CGI creations from the show. What did it look like when Millie Bobby Brown was battling the Mind Flayer? How about the special software that made the rats bubble? Let's take a look. Millie Bobby Brown puts up a pretty amazing fight against the Mind Flayer. But on the set, she definitely had the upper hand since these wild, long, and slimy tentacles weren't actually there and on the attack. Brown's performance combined with the CGI creatures make this scene totally believable. Of course, we can't forget this special monster attack. It's honestly a terrifying moment, but taking a peek behind the scenes, we see the monster wasn't the slimy mess that we see, but a lump of black material with some tracking spots on it that gets thrown off and away.
Well, that's nice.
We can't talk about the VFX of the Netflix hit without acknowledging one of the most incredible CGI feats of all. We're talking about the Mind Flayer. With the effects brought to life, this creature stands to be one of the most terrifying there is. But behind the scenes, it's a totally different picture as we can see here, with this giant beach ball at the end of a stick waving around throughout the set of a mall. This blue screen in the middle of the forest also helped in playing the role of the Mind Flayer. Check out how much of the shot is actually entirely CGI created. As for when Dacre Montgomery faces off with the monsters, instead of the giant creature coming at him from above, we can see that his enemy is actually angled up from below and less slimy and, well, more like a long silver pole with a big black handle at the end. At the other end of the pole was a stuntman just hidden off screen.
All this time, we've been building it.
While the majority of this monster was created with CGI, behind the scenes, things looked less terrifying and a bit, well, absurd. Check out this stunt guy dressed in red with, yes, that's a mirrored helmet. His running around, flailing arms, and screaming looks ridiculous as is here, but when the effects are all added in, we see just how effective the simulation is for creating the Tom Bruce monster. Check him out as he manages to creepily crawl over Natalia Dyer. His creature-like movements are perfect for emanating the monster that would join via CGI. Part of the reason for having this physical person enact the monster was to help the actors' performances. While it looks a bit silly, it was clearly super effective and helped the whole team to bring their A-game. Oh, and as for the mirror helmet, it wasn't just used because of how cool it looks. Practically, it was used to capture the light reflecting and how it would hit the creature. A special detail that really helped make the CGI look real. When the signature neon lights of the Starcourt Mall aren't up, the building doesn't look as wonderful. And the fact is, it's entirely created by CGI anyway. We can see in the mapping here that they're making sure to take care of every single detail. These CGI cars spread throughout the parking lot, the detailed work on the roof, and of course, the recognizable bright front entrance. As for the inside of the mall, well, it's pretty real, but fortunately the Mind Flayer didn't do nearly as much damage as we see in the final cut. We can see in this behind-the-scenes shot that the destruction of the Mind Flayer is done mindfully, with some practical bits adjusted here and there. The set is definitely a mess when the monster is finally defeated. There are some obvious worn and damaged-looking remnants we can see here. Combine this set with these incredible special effects, and the result really is amazing. There were some very messy interactions between the humans and the monsters. Remember all those people that were flayed? Each one of them had practical makeup done, but when the monster took over, CGI was key. Remember the tentacles latched directly on these faces? It's a terrifying image, but behind the scenes, there was a lot of playing pretend, and the actors definitely did a stellar job at acting as if life were being taken from them.
You don't have to do this.
While there were loads of incredible CGI creations throughout the Stranger Things series, the rats of Season 3 were epic. First of all, just look at the sheer number of them scurrying about. They look freakishly real, and in fact, at one time, they were. The team actually had rats trained and prepared, but they turned out to not be at the same level as the rest of the performers, so these CGI rodents were brought to life. Just when we think we've seen them all, somehow more rats always seem to appear out of nowhere. The amount of detail really adds to how convincing these scenes look. If we check it out closely, we can see literally every strand of hair, whisker, and, of course, those signature creepy black beady eyes. Then, of course, are the rats that go through, well, let's just say a bit of a tougher time. More on those CGI rodents later. Why just have regular rats when you can also have melting and exploding rats? Okay, maybe we haven't thought that ourselves, but the Stranger Things team definitely did. Remember these melting creatures in Miss Driscoll's basement? Let's just say we preferred them when they were the regular creepy rats. How did they make these strange and literally bubbly effects? A special software called Houdini was responsible for those effects used for the textures. The jam-like substance is super creepy to begin with, and then it moves. The effects team put great detail into simulating a mixture of various items and, of course, coated it off with some slime for good measure. Did you happen to notice the slick black tail amongst the slime blob? It's that kind of extra touch that really made these creatures perfect for the world of Stranger Things. The effects team made sure to get the approval of the kids of the show too, all of whom thought their creation was horrifying. That's when they knew it was a winner. Remember this dark and stormy beach? It was much more pleasant when they were actually shooting. They added these incredible huge rolling clouds, further highlighted by the reds, blues, and purples bursting through with light, creating an extremely intimidating scene. How about this intense fight? It looks like it's right in the middle of this brutal and blustering storm, but in reality, the whole thing wasn't even taking place on the beach like it was earlier in the scene. This whole sequence looks so different and way less intense in the green screen studio, but the actors do an amazing job with their performances to make the whole scene believable. The added VFX and CGI just bring it to that stellar Stranger Things level.
Mike?
This was one of the Duffer Brothers' favorite VFX used in the third season of Stranger Things. Inside the Russian lab, our minds are totally blown when we see the high-tech machinery going. The giant spinning turbine-like object alone has excellent effects like the speed of the spinning, lighting within, and the way the mechanism moves as a whole. Even some characters, like these workers we see, are entirely computer-generated. Though, there was an actual structure that sat in the place of the fantastical machine. See this long frame that holds the general shape of the turbine? The team even added these large silver balls to reflect the lights realistically, so the effects team had that to work with while adding all of the CGI we see in the final product. The snow in this exterior shot is both gorgeous and extensive. We totally believe it could be a real place. Until we see the CGI magic behind the creation showing us that it is just that. A totally CGI creation. In order to bring the scene to life realistically, the team incorporated things like thousands of snowflakes floating in the air, as well as using wind simulation so the blustering landscape looks real. Looking closely, we can appreciate all the architectural details added. All of this really completes the incredible computer-generated images.
Who do you work for?
Every moment, every beat is mapped out. Talking about a month-long process just for that 15 seconds.
Stranger Things is easily one of the most terrifying shows on Netflix. We've seen Demogorgons, Mind Flayers, and now we've got Vecna lurking around waiting for our Kate Bush CD to skip. Have you ever wondered what the show would look like without the visual effects bringing these creatures to life? Let's get into it.
Okay. Special effects.
Number 1. The Duffer Brothers only knew a few things for certain about the Demogorgon. They wanted him to come from another dimension and have a human body type. The body type was really important to them because they wanted to be able to put an actual person inside the costume for season 1 shooting purposes.
Very quickly we realized, okay, so practical isn't always gonna work.
In season 4, however, they brought in animation.
The first animation pass, that's when you're seeing what looks almost like just a gray clay rendering.
The first pass is really important because that's when they can hammer out the details, like how long they want him to roar, for example. After that, they get to the rendering stage. That's where the fun really starts. Everything they've shot, all the animation and real-life stunts get to coexist together.
It's really exciting when those shots finally come together and all the elements.
Number 2. The Demogorgon is one thing, but the actual fight scenes require a different approach. A good portion of time, the Demogorgon is just a guy in a green suit.
Sometimes he would have a tennis ball at the top of his head to show us how tall the Demogorgon was.
In the scene where Hopper has his major showdown with the Demogorgon, the Duffer Brothers really wanted to try and do that entire scene in one shot. But unfortunately, because of how dangerous the stunts were, they were not able to do that.
We didn't want to be using CG people on top of a CG, so we weren't able to do it all in one shot.
They wanted to protect their stunt team, so they did 3 big stunt sequences and stitched them all together. Would you have been able to tell?
The Americans are very tricky.
Number 3. It takes a lot of work, an entire team of people in fact, to make Vecna look as horrifying as he did. The actor, Jamie Campbell Bower, went through an egregious 8.5-hour prosthetic application every time he had to play Vecna. One thing they couldn't do with prosthetics though, was remove his nose.
On each application day, we had a black nose on Jamie with some little white marking dots, so VFX could remove that in post.
VFX also added in those creepy, slithering vines coming out of Vecna's back.
Time for you to join me.
Number 4. Speaking of Vecna, his 8.5-hour prosthetic seems to pay off, because the cast was typically very frightened whenever they'd shoot a scene with him.
Vecna was pretty much fully practical effects. Made it easier for me so I'm not like staring at a man in a green suit.
Sadie Sink also spent a great deal of her time in a harness, rehearsing for her levitation scene, right before her big showdown in the Upside Down.
There's not a lot that you have to do because it's genuinely just so scary.
Number 5. One thing you might not know about Steve's journey to Watergate was that it wasn't even shot in a real lake. It was shot in a convention center in Atlanta, Georgia. Joe Keery recounts diving into a 40-foot tank specifically built for this scene.
Getting to do that sort of stuff is like true movie magic.
Number 6. The insane shootout that destroyed every inch of the Byers' home was also shot in one take. Sean Levy, the director of episode 4, was compelled to do it all in one shot. He said it was the most challenging and most rewarding scene he's ever directed.
The whole challenge with the oneer is it requires perfect synchronicity.
Considering they only had one choreography session for this scene, it's fair to say they killed it. Everybody needed to do their job at a high level of near perfection.
It's a doozy.
Number 7. You know that part when Vecna's victims are getting every bone in their body snapped like a wishbone on Thanksgiving? Of course, how could you forget? It's quite difficult to watch, but surprisingly not that difficult to achieve with special effects. To break the fingers, it's essentially working with different layers of a moving hand within Adobe After Effects. For the legs, they utilize a much more practical approach. They need to put their arms through the pants so they can function as legs. And with the bigger range of motion of an arm, we can now create a twisting, breaking movement.
Who's Vecna? An undead creature of great power.
Number 8. The unique thing about Stranger Things is how they blend practical effects, like makeup and prosthetics, with VFX. In every scene with VFX, they also heavily rely on the makeup team. As we stated earlier, Jamie Campbell Bower worked very closely with the makeup team. So close that he had his own team of people applying lube onto his entire body.
Our last 10-15 minutes would be the 4 of us literally getting this product all over him to make him look really glossy.
Number 9. We're all familiar with Eleven's iconic nosebleed, but have you ever wondered how they get the blood to flow at the right time? At first, corn syrup. a lot of it. The only time Millie would get to call action on set was when she felt it dripping from her nose.
You know, my nose is running with blood, so I'm like, okay, are we ready? It's coming. 3, 2,
Because that didn't always go according to plan, they ended up using CGI blood for those scenes in later seasons.
It's fun to film, but also really stressful.
Number 10. The character of Victor had a brutal disfiguring after his encounter with Vecna. In reality, we can thank the brilliant prosthetic work of Barry Gower for Victor's disturbing look.
The sculpture of Victor Creel's appliance, which you can see the difference in tone, where the appliance finishes just prior to Robert's hairline.
The 2-hour process was so bad for the team because they were able to reference actual scars as opposed to something that is completely fictional.
I suppose all evil must have a home.
Number 11.
11 is me. Like, 11 is just who I am now.
It doesn't take very long for the cast to transform into their characters, but Millie's transformation into 11 is a little more involved.
It takes about an hour to do my old wig. My makeup isn't that crazy at all.
So, judging by this math, you could create at least 8 11s in the time it takes to create one Vecna. Jamie Campbell Bower, we do not envy you underneath all that molding clay. Number 12. In Stranger Things, the Upside Down is just as important as any other character in the show. So how exactly do they create it? A recurring theme we've seen with the Duffer Brothers is that they prefer to do things as practical as they can.
We realized that, in fact, the vision that the brothers had was more extensive than one can always do practically.
When it comes to creating all of the Upside Down creatures, they had to call on a team of CGI experts.
It starts usually with a sculpture, so we digitally sculpt things.
So with a mixture of practical components and a hard-working visual effects team, they were able to create this stunning world just beneath our own. So now you've seen it all. The blend of real-life animation, mounds of prosthetics, and the iconic man in the green suit. The visual effects team clearly works overtime in Hawkins.
CGI, it's hard. You know, when you're looking at a tennis ball, you don't get the same effect as if you were looking at a big, tall man.
CGI and visual effects seem to be an important part of filmmaking these days, with a little help from the actors on screen, of course. We love being transported into the world of a story through great VFX work, and we probably love watching what scenes look like without CGI equally as much. Stick around for a look at Enola Holmes scenes with and without CGI.
You get to have all sides of the spectrum all in one movie, and it's really exciting.
Number 1. Hold on to 'em. Enola Holmes features an intense sequence on a moving train, which had actors Millie Bobby Brown and Louis Partridge performing a number of stunts, while walking the line between practical and digital effects. Shooting the train was tricky enough with the complicated VFX involved, but this take went down the drain because of a simple, old-fashioned fan blowing Millie's hat off.
Well, your best idea remains leaping off this train, doesn't it?
Number 2. The acting is key. The Enola Holmes team can make the train look like it's really speeding through the hills, but if the actors don't sell that they're really on it, the illusion falls apart. Here's how actor Louis Partridge prepares in the moment to transport himself to the world of a speeding train in Enola Holmes.
Listen to music, that was my trick, and get your breath right. And then they say action and you go.
And then when you're looking at Millie and you're both giving the same sort of energy, that's when it flows right. Visual effects supervisor Michael Ellis said that it had to feel like they were really on the train, which is quite a hard thing to do. And when we think about it, we have to agree. The timing of the practical effects, like wind, or even just the gentle rocking of the train, can easily go wrong and spoil a take. When you add in all the other moving parts, shooting a sequence on a train is a bigger challenge than it might first appear. Michael Ellis added, "Of course, you can't really shoot on a real moving train. It's a bit dangerous, and kind of heavy, and people fall over. We decided to shoot it in a studio, with a green screen stage." Number 3. You gotta believe. With all the CGI involved, you might be surprised to hear that stunt performers were used at all in this sequence. Louis Partridge explains that he was not able to do his own stunts when it came to jumping off the train. "I'm not the Tom Cruise that I thought I might be." They used a stuntman called James. he has all the bruises to take home. James, if you're out there, we're feeling for you right now. That roll down the hill looked rattling to say the least. Even jumping off of a fake moving train can be dangerous.
It just went crazy.
Number 4. Everything else seems to be CGI. Have a look at this scene in the various stages of development. As it gets more complex, it looks like part of the digital scene was made from scans of a real environment, while things like the train were built from computers alone. We had the digital landscape, we had the digital river, and we had our digital characters down the hill as well. That's a very digital movie.
They were like, what?
Number 5. Remember them? Using CGI and digital effects to create part of the world of a story is a powerful tool, but using too much of it can make things feel like they're a little off. So what do? Add real people back into the scene, of course. After the careful process of mapping out this scene and creating elements that would make it convincing as an actual place in the world, it was time to add the actors back in with an outdoor shot.
I really enjoyed the practical sets.
Number 6. Goofing around on sets seems to follow Millie Bobby Brown around. Green screen studios and visual effects are important for the experience of Enola Holmes, but so is the human elements, which sometimes means the performance and other times means keeping it real by goofing around on set. Watch how fast Millie can floss.
It's quite cool.
And with all that green screen around, just imagine the possibilities. Someone's gotta take advantage of that.
You know, I really wanted to see a lead, female British lead.
Number 7. Think you'll like the view? When we think green screen and visual effects, we often think big, immersive, complicated, expensive. But often, it's the little things that can make the biggest differences. Take this scene for example, where that famous green color can be seen only through the window of the room where Enola is practicing her posture with that book on her head. Or this scene, where the only green screen we're actually seeing is for the skyline or some store signs.
I knew this would have a truer use.
Number 8. Oh yes, there's more. When we think of cable stunts, we tend to think more about Spider-Man than Enola Holmes. But believe it or not, actor Louis Partridge is actually dangling from a cable while on a harness in this scene, just when he's on the brink of falling out of the train. Millie Bobby Brown actually got her hand caught in the cable when trying to perform the action of pulling him back through the door. If we look at this scene without CGI, when Louis is dangling from the open door, you might notice it was actually the camera that was on rails speeding along, and not the train.
I'm not ready to die on a train.
I'm not ready to die at all, and I was going to before I met you.
Number 9. Who knows at this point? The visual effects team on Enola Holmes knew they needed to have the door come off the train for the tunnel sequence. To make this happen, they needed to match the real door with a CG door. So, they started with the real door in studio, mapped the camera movements and the actor's action carefully, and then recreated the real-life door and matched it perfectly with the CG version of itself. Number 10. Do you believe? Visual effects and CGI can have us thinking of elaborate changes to a scene, but often it can alter just a few details that take us a little further into believing in the world of the story. In this scene, you can see just a hint of that signature green color, indicating that production was intending to change something there. Was it a sky reflecting the mood of the scene? Or maybe a store sign with a hidden clue or message on it? Number 11. Enola Holmes features plenty of shining moments where digital meets physical. Sometimes, the most entertaining visual effects are just physical performance. But just like creating an elaborate CGI sequence, physical effects take plenty of preparation. Often that can mean training and rehearsal.
I'm like really careful.
Yeah.
I'm very good.
Take this fight scene. Here's what it looks like in rehearsal with all the visual elements stripped away.
I train for roles. That's what I do. I love training for roles.
Number 12. Millie Bobby Brown got more than her hands dirty in this action sequence. Check out this behind-the-scenes footage where Enola Holmes, wearing her new dress, gets into a scuffle with the bowler hat in the muddy streets of London. In case you were wondering, that mud is real.
It's exhausting and hard and tiring, but I actually really enjoyed it.
Millie went so far as to tease someone on set with the possibility of a very muddy wet hug. We wonder how many copies of this dress they wound up having on hand.
I'm very, very excited to be able to film it.
We love watching how great CGI work can transport an audience into the world of the story.
Enola is that for me, and it's been an amazing experience creating it.
And we definitely love watching the behind the scenes just as much. So what do you think?
Wanna go first?
You go.
It just takes a village to make the Gray Man.
The Gray Man is set to surpass any expectations you may have, with 9 intense action sequences, a stacked cast, and a ridiculous budget. The Russo brothers are shooting to create a new action franchise. Ready to find out just how they brought it all together? Number 1. Joe compared this situation to a Monty Python skit. There was a car on a swivel in front of a green screen, and the Russos told Ryan to lay down and just hang on as if the car was spinning at a very high speed. All they had to do was shake it a bit. It wasn't going the way Joe hoped, so he climbed on the car to show Gosling how it's done. Hopefully, we get to see the secret take they filmed. Number 2. Gosling went through all the different martial arts styles.
I've never made an action movie before, so it was a lot for me, of course.
The movie is designed around him, so it was all on his shoulders. 7 months were devoted to intense, highly specialized choreography. The Russos were a couple of teases to Gosling, too. They were eating like kings while he was eating some, quote, dried chicken breast thing. Joe's never met anyone who could do stunts like Chris Evans, at least until Gosling. Number 3. You should always be cautious of what they save for the end of filming. Take Ryan Gosling's word for it. He said, "When I was on the tram, it was nearly the end of filming. I'm running on top of these tram cars, and they're falling beneath my feet as I jump. I remember thinking, this sums up this experience. This is exactly what this movie has felt like." Number 4. Despite the 9 action sequences, the cast went pretty unscathed.
It was like a knockdown, drag out, every day kind of thing, but no emotional scars.
Joe Russo said that Gosling was getting beat up sequence after sequence and was weirdly loving it, while Chris Evans got into a little tussle with the Gray Man and battered his arm pretty bad. Deobia Opere trained for 4 months for a 10-minute sequence.
I was like, oh, pain? Oh, your back hurts? Oh no, baby. Okay, have fun.
Number 5. Watch out for her.
The training was really like 360 training.
Anna said, you have to create this unity on set, and you have to match the other person's energy. And you need to be very careful and give the other person the space to also feel safe and go at their own speed.
She's dangerous. She's a dangerous person. Be careful.
Number 6. Keep in mind the average is 4. 9 action sequences is just insane. The idea was to create a relentless experience for the audience. Joe and Anthony are entertained by excess. The novel the movie is based on has 11 action sequences. Joe had no idea how they were going to fit it all into one film, but they managed to pare it down to 9. Number 7. Chris ran mustache first into this part. So said Ryan Gosling. While Evans's character manifests as a sociopath, he doesn't see it that way. He sees him as someone fearless, being his authentic self. Chris believes that usually villains aren't burdened by complexities and insecurities. Number 8. This movie had barely any deleted scenes. Maybe a line was cut here or there, but these guys run a tight ship. The Russos have a very disciplined approach to working on a script. They're more than willing to cut things before they get filmed, rather than do all that work and cut it later, because energy is precious. Number 9. From grayscale to a rainbow of awesomeness. They wanted an extravagant amount of color to contrast the lead character. Joe said, the way that we approached the look and feel of the movie was in contrast to the expectation. They played with different techniques to keep the lead out of focus, by putting him in a weird part of the frame, lighting him slightly less, or keeping the focus off of him, which Anthony said sort of created the idea of a ghost-like quality. Number 10. The whole cast was put through the ringer.
Okay, I've worked for these X amount of months. Let's see what we got.
Joe admitted it's extremely physical. It can be painful. There's a Cirque du Soleil level of choreography going on. People are throwing punches at each other at very high speed, and if somebody misses by an inch, someone has a broken jaw. It requires incredible precision and a lot of training. Number 11. The Russos are giving us a slightly different kind of action star. Joe said he's a very modern hero. He's existential. He's obsessed with Sisyphus, the Greek myth of this character stuck in futility. It's what separates him from Bond and Bourne. As Ryan said, it's a proletariat hero. He just wants to get the job done and go home, and he has no desire to romanticize it. Number 12. Despite your best efforts, sometimes you have to make a cut. Filming the hospital scene took weeks. Before they'll release the actors for the day, they watch the footage to make sure it's working. And if it isn't, they get back to work. They tried a ton of different ideas on this one. It's the only one where any real cuts happened because they were so experimental with it.
I mean, I can see that.
Number 13. Their process is almost like cheating. Surround yourself with good people and you only have to do half the work. The other half of the work is great communication. Anna found she had freedom to explore during rehearsal times, find out what she was and wasn't comfortable with, and then they built the fight scenes around her and her ability. Number 14. We're not talking about the hissing Cobra Chicken's devil spawn, still just Ryan. Gosling got the call when the pandemic hit about some globe-trotting epic blockbuster for Netflix. He didn't think it was serious, but reality hit when he got his call time. He always wanted to make an action film. It took a long time to find the right one, but he knew that this was it because the Russos were manning the helm. Number 15. The Russo brothers have been obsessed with Ryan for the last 2 decades, just like everybody else. His character craves anonymity, but when he talks, the character has to be quirky and funny. Joe finds it hard to find an actor who possesses Ryan's range, because Ryan's incredible with minimalism, able to convey an entire interior life with just a few looks. Number 16. Keep in mind, John Wick only cost $25 million to make. This is Netflix's most expensive film ever, costing $200 million. This partially had to do with all of the cities that made gorgeous backdrops for the film, including Château de Chantilly in France, Los Angeles, the Czech Republic, Thailand, Austria, and Azerbaijan.
We shot an awful lot of it in a hangar in Long Beach.
Between the locations and the 9 action sequences that take up 3/4 of the film, they really racked up the bill. Number 17. Dynamic characters is the name of the casting game. Joe called Anna a badass who can embody her character in an extremely truthful way. Anthony said she had to create a very rich inner life where we can follow her thoughts and we can see her calculating her way through challenges. Number 18. So the stunt coordinator has an excellent sense of fashion, of course. They have a martial arts school in Orange County.
And that's their tracksuit?
Number 19. Let's just say the Russos could have used 48 hours in a day. The movie almost did in the 2 of them. They were so tired by the end of it because action requires an intense level of thought, care, and execution on set. But of course, the action wasn't their only responsibility. They were also editing at night and recrafting constantly, so they weren't sleeping. Number 20. Here's hoping this is the end of these pandemic tales of woe, huh?
And Jess would just kind of pass me notes under the floor saying, hey, can we be friends?
There was a lot of ad hoc building of environments due to the pandemic.
And I'd send back a little note full of hearts saying, no.
The Gray Man is shaping up to be the action movie of the year, and for good reason, huh?
We got choppers now? Wait, 11's taking down a chopper with mine?
Volume 2 of Stranger Things managed to pack everything we love about the series into 2 compact little episodes. We're taking a look inside the hive mind at how they managed to pull off their most intense episodes to date.
It's going to feel very different. It's going to feel very big. It'll be like season 1, on steroids or something.
Number 1. It's no secret that the cast of Stranger Things is top-notch. Well, our favorite cast of kids, young adults, are also phenomenal improvisers. From witty, quotable new lines to subtle little changes, the urgency and honesty these actors bring is next level. Like Caleb McLaughlin crying out to his sister. It's a sweet and tragic moment of vulnerability for Lucas. Another pretty super moment was Finn's improvisation during his monologue, which he only needed to shoot a few times, by the way, because he's a true pro.
You're my superhero!
And the brotherly love is in the air between Eddie Munson and Dustin Henderson.
I love you, Dad.
This tear-jerking moment was all gut instinct.
Our stuff together is so poignant and important to
driving his character.
Number 2. Behind the scenes of the Creel house had far fewer tripping hazards.
It's like hopscotch over imaginary vines.
Trying to step around all those vines was less dramatic because they weren't there. The actors were just trying to hit their mark. In other words, tape on the floor. There was no rope or anything standing in for the vines, so when Robin was strung up against the wall, Maya was just having to hold her arms in the air for a very long time. Joe broke the freaking camera during one take because he had to swing an axe close to it, but accidentally struck it.
Went directly into camera.
Like through this filter into the front, and the shot was amazing.
Number 3. Did you know that the voice of Vecna is all real? Don't believe us? Just check out Jamie Campbell Bower in the recording booth.
I saw a means to realize my potential.
Unlike how Dacre Montgomery had his voice altered and changed, adding a little unsettling and ominous tone when he was taken over by the Mind Flayer,
Now we can all see
Jamie's voice was all his.
to transcend my human form.
There was no need for Jamie to transcend his human form.
All I needed was someone to open the door, and he did that for me.
Number 4. Thanks to extra time, we got a ton of Eddie. Joseph Quinn knows his way around a guitar, but they did have another guitarist come in and do that epic solo regardless. Eddie Munson's fate wasn't always tied to his guitar, but as they talked about his ending, it became clear it's what they needed to do. They were able to go back to earlier episodes because none of them had been shot yet.
And layer in the guitar, layer in his band.
Usually they write about 4 scripts and are already shooting as the next chunk of scripts are being written. Joseph Quinn was pretty gutted when he found out they were quite literally gutting his character, but it was one epic send-off, and he couldn't really be mad about that.
The most surprising or surreal part of the fan experience.
Number 5. What seemed like a simple shot still took a very long time. Matt Duffer said, "We were very much inspired by Empire Strikes Back, that ending where they're looking out the window. We wanted to hint at the notion of war and a supernatural war coming to Hawkins. The cast and crew spent an entire super hot day out there just to get this one shot."
The most exhausting thing, but doing it together was the best.
Number 6. We know what you're thinking. How was this show Disney inspired? Well, the inspiration for the Creel House was actually the Haunted Mansion ride from Disneyland because Sean Levy doesn't enjoy horror. They gave him the required viewing list in addition to a music playlist, so he did have a crash course in horror, haunted house, fluency.
Abilities we have as storytellers have grown every year.
Number 7. Flipping stereotypes on their head was the goal. The writer's room really enjoyed taking characters and then doing role reversals, playing against the stereotypes, humanizing people like Eddie Munson and Chrissy.
You don't remember me?
I'm sorry.
Of course, this has been going on since season 1. The actors are really grateful for this as well, because it has led to such interesting and dynamic characters.
We're the freaks because we like to play a fantasy game.
Number 8. Honestly, we might have just turned the TV off if they did in Max for good. They had a ton of discussions about what they wanted to do, but it became very important for season 5 that Max be in a coma. This season was influenced heavily by Empire Strikes Back, of course, and so Max's coma was an attempted parallel to Han Solo being frozen in carbonite. Do you think that came across at all?
I'm here, Max.
Number 9. Sometimes the nonsensical offing of characters' heads just isn't necessary. The Russian double-crosser Enzo almost met a tragic fate in a previous draft of the script, but honestly, there was no reason for it. It didn't move the plot along, so why not give this guy his happy ending too? And more Star Wars references. The demo bats were inspired by the parasitic Minoc bats in The Empire Strikes Back. In an earlier draft, the demo bats had serrated tail tentacles that were meant to wrap and then cut flesh. If they had this trait, they could have too easily killed Steve. Another design was way too similar to the demo dogs and demogorgons because its head and body split open the same way.
I really like that stuff, and as the show has gone on, I've gotten to do more and more of it.
Number 10. Crafting the big baddie is always time-consuming work. Vecna went through a ton of different concept art. The first design to haunt your nightmares is the one of him with hair and a pathetic excuse for a face. You can see the evolution of one idea from the initial fish inspiration to giving him a spiky coat of armor. The praying mantis design is awesome, but it wasn't exactly a practical design for filming either because of its long legs. And the Duffer Brothers were really leaning towards Vecna being practical. The alien designs were direct inspiration from the Demogorgons and Demodogs, and would have tied him in aesthetically with the rest of the upside-down creatures. These designs, while amazing in theory, just didn't disguise Henry well enough or didn't allow for enough expression.
Move my fingers around really slow. I'm moving them fast now because I'm excited.
Number 11. Floating rocks. It's too complicated. At one point, the particles were going to be harvested from floating rocks. It had a lot to do with how gravity worked differently in this realm, but it was too lengthy to try and explain.
Would you like to join them?
Probably the coolest alternate design for Vecna's lair was a later one, more in line with the spider theme, where his victims were hanging from the vine like it was a spider web.
You could not change us.
Number 12. It's got to be a great feeling when some of the greats want to work with you. Robert Englund sent in an audition tape of himself lying in a bathtub, fully clothed, mind you, pouring his heart out. So no, it wasn't the Stranger Things team's idea to bring in Freddy Krueger, but it was a perfect pairing. Number 13. The Stranger Things cast are just so melodramatic.
We actually went on a 45-minute walk that day. Do you remember?
The day in question was the end for Eleven's papa. They walked all the way from the base camp through the middle of the desert because they were sad. Millie did love the boldness of Eleven to not wrap up her complicated relationship with her papa by giving him what he wanted in those last moments.
Goodbye, Papa.
Number 14. The style of the show still throws the actors for a loop. A lot of the time they're thinking, okay, so we're about to face this big bad evil thing. We're scared, right? And the Duffer Brothers are like,
Nah, like you're pretty confident.
The levity in the characters is really just rejuvenating for the actors, who, if they were stuck in a place of constant terror, might just find the show not so fun to film. Number 15. We're not talking about Vecna's clocks, but Netflix's. They were cutting it close to time with adding the final VFX. Actually, their time was so bad that if you tuned in to watch Volume 2 right upon release, there were a few VFX shots that weren't done yet, and people were encouraged not to watch until the morning, when they would be complete.
Want to see something cool?
Was it or wasn't it CG? From the hovercrafts to flipping cars to a fully built and then entirely replaced set, the Atom Project knew how to make the best of their special and practical effects. Number 1. The fights were real. CG just made them better. One of the most complicated fights choreo-wise was when Zoe Kravitz and Ryan Reynolds were reunited and battling side by side, with the trusty blue screen behind them to touch up the image in post. When Reynolds needed his lightsaber, his magsil, CG took care of the magic, making him look as slick as he was acting. While CG replaced their bodies and tech on set, those actors battling Reynolds really were suited up in tough and futuristic looking gear. Number 2. It wasn't always safe, but they pulled it off. The set was stunts galore, and everyone took part. Even newcomer Walker Scoble, who got up close and personal with a harness and wires that allowed him to safely land his first superhero pose. It wasn't so glamorous for the other Atom, who straight up dealt with a rough car smack. Number 3. Little Adam says it best. That was awesome. Kravitz may have pulled the trigger, boom, but it was the VFX specialists who made the explosions we see next level. Just because CG was playing a part didn't mean the team was going to skip out on the chance to use a real car for their stunt though. The effects just cleaned the image up. Blue screens were all around the giant practical set, giving the actors space to perform the intense choreo they worked on for months, while CG brought the fire wherever and whenever needed. Number 4. Shockingly, a ton of the chase scene isn't CGI. That's right. 50% of what we see on screen throughout the big chase fight was 100% really done. And that included the hovercraft racers.
And I said, can we actually do that for real?
Luckily, the answer was yes.
We surfed these guys through the woods in British Columbia.
Sitting inside the truck zooming through the woods did involve a truck. Racing, not so much.
You guys shot on a green screen stage, in a truck in front of green screen.
And then there's the whole launching out of the ship moment that happened completely in studio, with performers rigged up safely in front of a special blue screen and hooked up to a real hoverboard. Except for this shot, the boards took a backseat and let the VFX team do the heavy lifting. Number 5. We're talking Saurian style.
It's called a magsil. Look it up. You can't because it's not real.
They may be Saurian weapons, but these intricate and fascinating looking tools were actually created by a small company called Super Vixen.
all the way down under in Australia.
I feel like there's that basic thrill of seeing something you haven't seen before.
All the designed pieces were 3D printed and put together. No easy feat considering there were over 200 pieces to put together in total. For the scene that sees weapons and tools flying through the air, the visual effects team used the custom designed tools as a base and then mocked them up digitally for the final edit. Number 6. What you see isn't always what you get. Or is it?
I told the VFX team, I need some kind of program that allows me to see the virtual set.
The high-tech and spacey-looking office was a totally constructed set in a giant blue studio, one that allowed the actors to really immerse themselves in the world and technology.
It's really opened up shot design possibilities in a real way and from angles that I can't even get to.
Mark Ruffalo made sure to take advantage of the fact that he could actually interact with the set. While all the detail was great for the actors to work with, it wasn't totally up to scratch for the final edit, so the whole lab was digitally replaced in post, but based on the design that was built in real life. Number 7. Spontaneously appearing aircraft? No biggie. But really,
first of all, none of that was there.
You heard her say it. No real spacecrafts were harmed in the making of this film, since there were no ships to be harmed. The skies were all clear, so the editing team had a solid base to bring the ship to life via CG. And a pretty wicked-looking one at that.
Let's just go home, please.
Number 8. We've never seen Catherine Keener looking like this before. And hopefully we won't again, considering what we got on screen was not at all a true-to-life version of a younger Keener. This deepfake didn't totally work out, as instead of relying on makeup and prosthetics, the actress was given a CG face put over top her actual face, making for some seriously uncanny valley vibes.
I fixed that future.
De-aging is tricky, but we definitely prefer Keener without the CG.
Then why are you back here now?
Aside from the one CG face misstep, the special effects team for the Atom Project went above and beyond to elevate this film to the next level.
Called it the Atom Project.
Did you think all the hovercraft action was full CG too? Who knew?